They found me curled up in the server room, asleep on a blue beanbag chair I brought from home, my hoodie half-zipped, my fingers still resting on the warm keys of my laptop. That was where I was when the new chief operating officer, Eleanor Croft, walked in with her plastic clipboard and clicking heels, searching for the ghost who had built the infrastructure. Apparently, no one in the main office had seen me in person for weeks. Yet, the systems were humming. Emails were being answered, payroll was being processed, vendors were paid, reports were filed, and client issues were resolved like clockwork. I was the clock. I did not look like a corporate hero. I looked like a burnt-out, over-caffeinated programmer in compression socks and broken trust. That was 5 weeks ago. This morning, I got fired. There was no warning, no thank you, no handshake, just a brief online video call with Logan Mercer, the kind of middle manager whose favorite phrase was to circle back. He smiled like a kid who had just got away with cheating on a test. "We are letting you go," he said, his voice dripping with cheap sincerity. "You have built a system so good we barely need humans anymore." It is a compliment, really, but you know how the budget is, and we must make some adjustments to streamline our operations. I nodded slowly, showing no emotion. What I did not say was that the system only runs because I let it. I did not tell him that I had built the whole system around a silent heartbeat, a hidden line of code I named Bluebird. If the system ever detected that my user account was deactivated, the wings folded, everything would stop. I did not say a single word of protest. I did not complain when the Human Resources Department emailed a generic exit checklist. I did not argue when my messaging account was suspended. I did not flinch when the junior systems administrator, who once called me a wizard behind the curtain, disabled my login credentials. They thought I was gone, a relic swept out with the trash. But the heartbeat was still ticking, and I was not done with them yet. I had given 5 years of my life to that place. 5 years of being ignored in meetings, of being told to adjust my attitude, of watching less competent people get promoted to manage the systems I designed. I automated 90% of my department, not because I wanted to disappear, but because I wanted room to breathe. I wanted to do my work without the constant chatter of people who did not understand the difference between a database and a spreadsheet. And now, I was going to show them exactly what happened when you fired the architect but tried to keep the house. The walk to my apartment was quiet. The city was covered in a gray mist, the rain just beginning to slick the streets. I carried my small cardboard box containing a single mug, a notebook, and my blue beanbag chair. I was 48 years old, and for the first time in my professional life, I did not have a job. But as I unlocked my door and set the box on the counter, I felt a strange sense of anticipation. I knew the timeline. I knew exactly how long the temporary buffers would hold before the first database tables began to fragment. They had the keys, but they did not know where the locks were. I sat in my armchair, poured a glass of water, and waited for the clock to run down. Back at the office, they were probably celebrating their payroll savings. Logan Mercer was likely drafting an email to the board, taking credit for streamlining the operations and cutting redundant headcount. He believed that the software was just a static machine, a tool like a hammer that would keep striking the same spot forever. He had no understanding of the delicate balance of data streams, the API handshakes, and the constant verification loops that kept the platform alive. I had spent countless nights patching silent leaks, fixing database deadlocks, and rewriting poorly written queries from junior developers. All of that was gone now. The system was on its own, running on momentum, and the friction was already building. I looked at the digital clock on my wall and smiled, knowing that the first warnings would appear before the sun went down. To ensure my silent code worked, I had set the deactivation trigger deep within the core server registry. Every 15 seconds, the Bluebird script sent an encrypted handshake query to verify my employee user account status. If the query returned a deleted or deactivated response from the Active Directory server, a countdown timer would begin. It was a 24-hour buffer designed to prevent false alarms during routine maintenance. Once that countdown hit 0, the script would begin deauthorizing the access tokens for the primary database servers. The entire office infrastructure would lose its connection to the database layer. In their eyes, the servers would look perfectly healthy, but no data would flow. It was the digital equivalent of a heart continuing to beat while the blood stopped moving through the veins. They had no idea that their entire operation was now holding its breath. The real trouble began 6 hours later, just as the afternoon was fading into twilight. I sat in the quiet study of my apartment, sipping coffee and watching the public interface log of the company network on my personal monitor. I did not write a virus, and I did not deploy a malicious exploit. That would be illegal. I simply watched my deactivated credential trigger the quiet countdown inside Bluebird. At exactly 4:30 in the afternoon, the customer ticketing system locked every user account. Then, the automated human resources bot began responding to vacation requests with a bizarre automated template that read, "Rot in hell." By 5 in the afternoon, the finance team discovered they could not access the payroll ledger, and the legal team lost version control on all active contract archives. A junior developer tried to reboot the database, but I had programmed a decoy interface. Every button he pressed on his console just played elevator music on his speakers. Logan Mercer left 3 frantic voicemails on my phone, his voice rising in pitch with each message. In the first, he was professional. In the second, he was annoyed. In the third, he was pleading. I did not answer. I had 2 options. Option 1 was to ignore them and watch television. Option 2 was to watch television while drinking water from my favorite mug. I chose option 2. By midnight, the internal Slack logs were unraveling. A junior analyst had tried to restore the system by copying a zip file labeled Automation Backup into the live environment. That was a mistake. The zip file triggered a fake recovery routine I had left behind as a decoy, and suddenly their entire internal wiki was redirecting to a vintage music video. People were panicking, and Logan was editing a public document, writing that the company was facing an unexpected third-party service outage. No, Logan, it was not a third party. It was just the employee you discarded to save a few dollars. I remembered the meeting from 6 months ago. I had sat in Logan's office, presenting a clear spreadsheet showing that my automation tools had saved the company $2,300,000 in labor costs over the last year. I asked for a modest raise. Logan looked me in the eye, adjusted his collar, and said that I was already well compensated. He added that the real value of the company was teamwork, not lines of code. My eye had twitched, but I did not argue. I just went back to my desk and got surgical. I began adding fail-safes and conditional checks to the code. I even renamed one critical dependency to lunch order script so that no one would dare delete it. Now, that surgical precision was paying off. The automated printer in the main corridor started up at 3:17 in the morning, printing the words, "Where is Julian?" in large letters on hundreds of pages. The printer in the main hall was a high-capacity office model, and it did not stop until it had run out of paper completely. The night watchman tried to turn it off, but the control panel was locked behind a password he did not have. By morning, the corridor was covered in hundreds of sheets of paper, making the entire office entrance look like a disaster zone. The junior developers had to spend their first hour cleaning up the mess, which only added to the confusion. Then, the CRM system began automatically emailing invoices to major clients for the amount of 1 cent, with the description labeled as emotional damages. The system was starting to tear itself apart at the seams, and there was nothing their remaining team could do to patch it. They did not understand the logic, they did not have the keys, and they had no idea that Bluebird was just getting started. I closed my laptop, went to bed, and slept better than I had in years. While they scrambled in the dark, I reflected on how Logan Mercer had spent the last 2 years climbing the corporate ladder by presenting my dashboards as his own. He would take my weekly summaries, change the colors to match his favorite templates, and present them to the board as his strategic initiatives. He did not know how the APIs were configured, nor did he understand the database schema. To him, technology was just a magic box that produced charts for his slideshows. He had assumed that once the box was built, the builder was no longer necessary. He was about to learn a very expensive lesson about the difference between owning a tool and understanding how to keep it from breaking. In the middle of the night, the finance director reportedly called Logan in a panic. The automatic reconciliation script had stopped running, leaving their quarterly reports incomplete. The database connection was broken and the logs showed thousands of failed red attempts. Logan had tried to call our cloud provider, believing it was an external hosting issue, but they confirmed that the hosting servers were operating at peak efficiency. The issue was internal, a silent refusal of the code to execute. The system was running, but it was blind, unable to see the data it needed to process. I imagined Logan standing in his office, surrounded by stale coffee cups and useless notes, trying to explain to the executives why their streamlined system had suddenly stopped working. It was a beautiful mental image, and it kept me warm as the night rain beat against my windows. The next morning brought a fresh wave of panic to the glass tower. I woke up at 8 and found a message on my professional social media account from Diana Cross, the head of the Information Technology Department. She asked if we could schedule a quick call to discuss system dependencies. I left it unread. She had previously criticized my coding standards as being too dense, and now she was begging for a basic explanation of the routing structure. By 9 in the morning, the support desk queue had reached 4,367 unresolved tickets. The internal scheduler had gone completely wild, double-booking the chief executive's calendar with 30-minute meetings titled "How to Apologize to the Person You Fired," scheduled every hour for the next 2 weeks. At 9:42, the main payroll processor crashed completely. The screen went blank, showing a single error message: "Bluebird has gone silent." That was when they knew. Bluebird was not just a script, it was the silent recording of my time at the company. I had programmed it to log every instance of ignored feedback, every meeting where my contributions were claimed by someone else, and every budget decision that prioritized middle management bonuses over developer salaries. It was a detailed archive of corporate neglect, all structured into an interactive dashboard, and it was accessible only with my private password. Logan Mercer sent another text message. "This is getting out of hand," he wrote. "We are losing contracts. You have made your point. Can we talk?" I took a screenshot, saved it to my backup drive, and did not reply. At exactly 1 in the afternoon, their largest logistics client called the chief executive directly, because the automated data sync I wrote, which saved them 400 man-hours every month, was offline. The client threatened to pull their contract if the system was not restored by the end of the day. That was when the chief executive officer, Eleanor Croft, decided to take action. She did not call. She did not send an email. Instead, she drove to my apartment building. I watched through the peephole of my door as she stood in the hallway, holding a gift basket filled with lavender bath products and a cheap bottle of wine. I let her stand there for 3 minutes before I opened the door. She looked exhausted, her face pale and her eyes showing that she had finally realized what I actually did for the company. "Did you bring my severance package?" I asked flatly. "Or is this just a collection of items from the local convenience store?" She blinked, swallowing her pride, and whispered that she did not fully understand the complexity of what I had built. I leaned against the doorframe, holding my coffee. "Oh, you understood it," I said. "You just did not respect it. And now you are standing in front of the only person who can put the system back together. And I am not sure I want to do that." She stood there, her hands trembling slightly, as she realized that her authority meant nothing in my hallway. I did not invite her in. I let the silence stretch between us, enjoying the cool draft from the window. She tried to offer excuses, saying that Logan Mercer had assured her the transition would be seamless. She claimed she had been told that my role was mostly administrative and that the junior team could easily manage the daily maintenance. I laughed quietly. "Logan Mercer does not know the difference between a server and a refrigerator," I said. "He told you what you wanted to hear so he could meet his budget targets and claim his quarterly bonus. And now, you are facing a massive breach of contract with your biggest clients because you trusted a manager who cannot even configure his own email client." She looked down at the gift basket in her hands, her expression a mix of embarrassment and desperation. The power dynamic had shifted completely, and we both knew it. The corridor outside my apartment was dim, and the smell of the lavender bath bombs was strong enough to make me want to sneeze. Eleanor Croft stood there, looking completely out of place in her tailored navy suit and designer heels. She had spent her entire career in clean boardrooms, managing budgets and issuing directives to people who nodded like machines. She had never had to stand in a drafty hallway begging a developer she had dismissed to save her company from bankruptcy. I took another slow sip of my coffee, letting the silence settle over us like dust. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, her clipboard clutched tightly to her chest as if it could protect her from the reality of the situation. I was in no hurry. The longer she stood there, the more she would realize that corporate titles meant nothing when the servers were dead. Each meeting invitation was automatically sent to the board members as well, making them believe that Eleanor was actively organizing a public apology campaign. She had to spend her entire morning manually declining the invitations, but the cron job simply generated new ones to replace them. It was a relentless loop that showed the board members how completely she had lost control of her own schedule, highlighting the chaotic state of the firm's leadership. The company's internal operations were grinding to a halt, and every manager in the building was starting to realize that their roles were entirely dependent on the automation scripts they had dismissed as mere overhead. Eleanor Croft pleaded with her eyes, asking if we could talk off the record. I stepped back and allowed her to enter my living room. The room was set up like a war room, with whiteboards covered in system diagrams, stacks of notebooks, and my laptop humming on the desk. She sat down on the edge of the sofa, looking uncomfortable. I remained standing, looking down at the executive. Off the record, I repeated, mimicking her tone. That is the phrase Logan Mercer used right before he told me my position was redundant, right after I wrote the scripts that made his entire reporting line obsolete. She looked surprised, claiming she did not know about that. I laughed. Of course you did not, but Bluebird did. I opened my laptop and showed her a folder labeled Evidence. Inside were hundreds of system logs and documents. Eleanor tried to regain her composure, pointing out that under my employment contract, all code written during my time at the company belonged to the firm. She claimed they could legally force me to hand over the passwords. I smiled, tapping a document on the screen. That would be true, I said, if the contract were valid. But it is not. I opened the Digital Compliance Archive and showed her the intellectual property assignment agreement that was supposedly signed by me 15 days after I was terminated. I had never seen that document, and I had certainly never signed it. I showed her the audit logs. The digital signature had been applied using a master administrator token, and the network handshake logs proved it was uploaded from Logan Mercer's corporate laptop at 4 in the morning. Under California Penal Code Section 470, forging a digital signature to claim ownership of intellectual property is a felony. Because the signature was forged, the agreement is void ab initio, meaning it was invalid from the very beginning. The company has no legal claim to my custom scripts, and more importantly, the compliance certifications you submitted to your investors are fraudulent. You have committed securities fraud to cover up your manager's incompetence. The color drained from her face as the legal implications sank in. She realized that this was not just a technical glitch, it was a corporate disaster that could destroy the company and land Logan Mercer in prison. I did not stop there. I pressed a single key on my laptop, sending an automated email to every board member and major investor. The email contained a link to a private dashboard showing the exact productivity levels of the company, before and after my account was deactivated, along with the audit logs showing the forged signature. I looked at Eleanor and told her that she had 24 hours to make this right before the evidence was delivered to the regulators. She stood up, her phone already buzzing with calls from board members, and rushed out of the apartment without saying another word. As she left, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. I had not resorted to illegal hacking or destructive behavior. I had simply used the truth as my weapon, backed by clear digital evidence and the strict application of the law. Logan Mercer had thought he was being clever, using my credentials to sign off on compliance audits after I was gone to keep the investors happy. He had assumed that a quiet programmer would never look at the system logs or challenge the corporate structure. He had underestimated my attention to detail, and now his own fraudulent actions had given me the leverage to dictate my own terms. The entire house of cards was about to fall, and Logan Mercer was standing right underneath it. The digital signature system had recorded the specific administrator token used during the transaction. It was a unique cryptographic key that I had stored on a secure development server which Logan's had accessed without authorization. In his haste to close the funding round with the Swiss investors, he had copied the key and applied it to the document, unaware that the system logged the exact IP address and system parameters of the computer that initiated the upload. I had configured the logging system to record these details years ago, a standard practice that Logan had dismissed as unnecessary overhead. His own negligence had created the trail that would lead to his downfall. I watched my dashboard as the board members began opening the emails. The read receipts lighting up my screen like small beacons of victory. Furthermore, my legal advisor had confirmed that the forged signature on the intellectual property agreement invalidated all subsequent filings with the state regulatory board. The company was now operating in a legal vacuum, claiming ownership of assets they did not own while presenting false statements to secure financial investments. Under the federal guidelines, this was a clear violation of corporate transparency laws, which carried heavy fines and the potential for a complete suspension of their business license. Eleanor Croft was smart enough to recognize that their corporate shield was completely broken, leaving them exposed to lawsuits from both investors and clients. She knew she had no choice but to comply with my demands, as any attempt to fight me in court would only accelerate their public collapse. By Friday afternoon, the pressure on the company was immense. The board members were in a state of panic, and the Swiss investors were threatening to withdraw their capital immediately. Logan Mercer called my phone, his voice shaking. He offered to double my salary, pay a massive retention bonus, and reverse the termination paperwork. I told him that I did not care about his money. I told him that if they wanted the systems restored, I had 3 conditions. First, a written statement must be sent to the board admitting to the mishandling of my termination, with Logan's name listed first. Second, I demanded full administrator credentials and permanent protections for my department. Third, Logan Mercer must be demoted and ordered to report directly to Chloe Brooks, our 23-year-old intern who actually understood the systems. He gasped, claiming that was not realistic. I told him that firing the only person who kept the company running was also not realistic, and then I hung up. 2 hours later, the written statement was delivered to my inbox, signed by the board. On Monday morning, I walked back into the glass tower. The security guard looked up, froze, and then gave me a slow, respectful nod. The office was in complete disarray, with developers staring at screens in confusion, and Logan Mercer sitting at a small desk near the copier, his head in his hands. I walked past him without a word and entered the boardroom, where the partners and Eleanor Croft were waiting. I did not bring a presentation. I simply opened my tablet and demonstrated the new automation platform I had built over the weekend. It was clean, secure, and highly efficient, but it was designed to run under my direct supervision. I am not coming back as an employee, I told the board. I am coming back as a partner. I will manage the technology department under a new contract, and my team will report directly to you, not to middle managers who do not know how to read a log file. The board members looked at each other, then at the system metrics on the screen. The chief technology officer, Harvey Albright, was the first to nod. Approved, he said. The rest of the board followed. Later that afternoon, I sat in my new corner office, watching the data flow smoothly across my monitors. Bluebird was online, humming quietly, its wings open. I looked out the window at the city skyline, feeling the weight of the last 5 years lift from my shoulders. Near the copier, Logan Mercer was typing a report, his hands still trembling as Chloe Brooks stood over his shoulder, correcting his formatting. I had not destroyed the company. I had simply rebuilt it on a foundation of respect. I sipped my coffee, looked at the code on my screen, and smiled, knowing that the architect was finally in charge of the house. As the days turned into weeks, the transition proved to be highly successful. The clients were pleased with the restored service, and the Swiss investors agreed to proceed with the funding once they saw the new compliance controls in place. Logan Mercer remained at his small desk by the copier, a constant reminder to the rest of the office that technical expertise could not be easily replaced by corporate politics. I did not feel any malice toward him. I simply felt a quiet satisfaction that justice had been served. The systems were running better than ever, and for the first time my work was being recognized for its true value. I was no longer a ghost in the wires. I was the architect of the company's future, and my name was written clearly at the top of the organization chart. Chloe Brooks proved to be an excellent manager. She had spent months silently studying my code, asking intelligent questions, and taking notes while Logan was busy with his slideshows. She was the only person in the department who had shown any interest in the actual architecture of the systems, and now she was directing the recovery efforts with confidence and precision. Logan had to submit his daily reports to her, and she did not hesitate to return them if they contained errors or lacked detail. The irony of the situations was lost on no one, and the developers worked with a renewed sense of purpose. I watched the progress from my office, knowing that I had not only secured my own position, but also created a space where genuine competence was valued. The new charter was signed, the department was rebuilt, and the systems were humming in perfect harmony. The boardroom meeting on Monday had lasted less than 30 minutes, but it represented a fundamental shift in how the company operated. Harvey Albright had recognized that without my custom scripts, the firm had no viable product to offer to their logistics clients. He had spent the weekend reviewing the performance logs and had concluded that my automation tools were the only reason the company had remained profitable during the market downturn. When I presented the new suite, which incorporated advanced data verification and secure API handshakes, the partners realized that the old way of managing developers was obsolete. They signed the partnership agreement without a single modification, granting me the authority to hire my own team and establish a modern technology department. I walked out of the room, looking at the city's skyline through the glass walls, knowing that the platform was now protected from the incompetence that had almost destroyed it.